Welcome to my channel. I hope today's story captures your interest and leaves you wanting more. Your continued support truly means a lot to me. Now, let's get started with the story.
When Laura said, "You're nothing without me," she meant it like a sentence, not an insult. A final verdict. Cold. Legally binding. She didn't slam the door. No, Laura was never theatrical. She closed it with the same precision she used to sign the divorce papers. Like it was just another line item. Another calculation. She always believed in strategy over emotion. Even our arguments had outlines. She'd start with a fact, build her case, and watch me crumble in the silence between rebuttals. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her indifference was louder than any scream. That day, the last day, I stood outside the house I once helped build. The windows were dark. The blinds drawn. My name was still on the deed, but it didn't matter. She'd already changed the locks, transferred the accounts, rerouted the mail. There was a note taped to the inside of the glass, just below the peephole. In her handwriting, Laura never sent texts for things that mattered. Do not return. You have no claim here. Not no place, not no right. No claim. A legal word. She wanted me to know it was final, traceable, carved in language that couldn't be softened. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again. The dog barked inside. I used to walk him every morning before work. He was a rescue we picked up together, back when we thought shared responsibility was the same as love. Now he growled, then quieted. I saw a silhouette move behind the curtain upstairs. Not hers, the maid's maybe, or one of the boys she hired for odd jobs. Probably already tossing out my things. I stood there for a long time. In the rain. No suitcase. Just a duffel bag, an old phone with 18% battery, and a mother's debit card so scratched it looked like a museum piece. That was all I had left. My wallet was empty. My dignity, too. I looked like someone who'd been kicked out of a stranger's house. Not a man freshly divorced from a woman worth $17 million. I didn't even take the car. She kept both. One was hers. The other, well, the lease was in her name. And the insurance. And the gas card. I realized in that moment I hadn't owned a thing in years. Not really. Not a car. Not the house. Not even my time. The money I earned was joint. But her money? That was hers. Always had been. She reminded me of that in little ways. Taxes filed separately. Accounts kept cleanly divided. Reminders about your spending limit. Even when the bill was for groceries. The lawyers made quick work of it. No children, no custody fights. Just assets. Or rather, the lack of them on my side. The judge didn't even blink. "You've been living off your wife's earnings," her attorney said, with a kind of smirk I wanted to wipe off with a punch. There's no legal basis for spousal support. Laura didn't look at me once during the proceedings. She didn't flinch. I should have known. Years ago, she had told me straight, marry rich but sign poor. She wasn't joking. I was the fool who laughed. So that's how I ended up in a motel room on the edge of Springfield, Missouri. Not even the nice side. I'm talking cracked pavement, a dying neon sign, the kind of place people go when they don't want to be remembered. Room 214. Smelled like fried onions and bad decisions. The toilet ran all night. There were burn marks on the carpet that told stories I didn't want to know. I paid for 4 nights with what little was left in my checking account. Just enough to stall panic. The clerk, a girl who looked like she hadn't slept since high school, slid the key across the desk without eye contact. No ID check. No deposit. Even she knew I had nothing left to steal. The TV didn't work. The phone had no dial tone. I lay on the bed, listening to the hum of the old fridge, trying not to count the ways I had failed. Friends? Gone. Laura had the charm, the money, the connections. I was the man who held her purse at fundraisers, smiled too wide at her jokes, clapped politely when she was awarded yet another plaque for business excellence. After the divorce, mutual acquaintances evaporated. Some sent texts. Tough break, man. Hope you land on your feet. But none offered a couch. The one who did, Ray, ghosted me after Laura posted a photo with her new boyfriend 2 weeks later. Young guy, teeth like piano keys, probably in real estate. She moved on fast. It didn't even surprise me. What surprised me was how quiet the world got without her in it. No schedules, no obligations, no dinners, no arguments about who forgot to take the recycling out. Just silence. And in that silence, I realized something ugly. I didn't know who I was without her. Not in the poetic sense. Not in the I lost my identity way people say after breakups. I mean, literally, I didn't have ID. She'd locked it in the safe. Claimed I was unstable. I'd have to go to the DMV. Start from scratch. I didn't even know how to fill out the forms anymore. The phone barely held signal. When it did, I stared at the screen, watching for messages that wouldn't come. I tried calling my brother. He let it ring, then texted, "Hey, not a good time." I didn't call again. That night, I opened the duffel bag. 3 shirts. 1 toothbrush wrapped in a sock. 1 cracked photo of me and my mother. I don't even remember packing it. And the debit card. Felt like a joke. Faded blue plastic. Mary Collins. My mother's name. She died 7 years ago in a hospice bed that smelled like bleach and fear. She wasn't rich. Not in life. Not in death. A nurse for 40 years. I held the card up to the dim motel lamp. The numbers were nearly rubbed off. Why had I even brought it? Sentiment? Muscle memory? It didn't matter. The next morning, I walked into a small local bank just to feel like a person again. Maybe get enough for a gas station sandwich. Something warm. Something real. There was a kid at the counter. Couldn't have been older than 20. Name tag read Eric. Hair too neat for someone working in a dying town like this. I handed him the card. Doubt it still works, I muttered. He smiled, polite but distracted. Slid the card through. Waited. Looked at the screen. His face changed. Not subtly. Not the kind of shift you see when there's a $5 error. He swallowed. Clicked a few times. Looked at me. Sir. His voice was different now. Lower. Controlled. Would you mind stepping into the office with me? I blinked. Is there a problem? He just nodded. It's urgent. Please. Just for a moment. I thought it was fraud. Maybe identity theft. Maybe the account was flagged. Maybe the card wasn't even real anymore. But something in his face, that tension, told me it was bigger. Much bigger. So I followed him. Into a quiet room. With a glass door. And a computer screen that would change everything. But that part, the turning point, that came later. For now, I sat down in that plastic chair and waited. And for the first time in years, I had no idea what would come next. The office smelled like printer toner and fake pine. Some kind of plug-in air freshener sat crooked in the wall, buzzing faintly. The blinds were drawn halfway, slicing sunlight into bars across the floor like a holding cell. I sat across from the kid, Eric, the teller. As he typed quietly, the way someone types when they're trying to look calm but their hands betray them. He pulled up a screen. Then another. His eyes kept darting to the monitor and back to me. The silence dragged on. All right, I said, voice low. What's going on? Eric hesitated, cleared his throat. Then he turned the screen. Is that your name? He asked. I leaned in. There it was, clear as day. Account holder, Michael Collins. Trust beneficiary, Michael Collins, established by Mary Collins. I started, then stopped. I didn't remember any trust. No one ever said a word about it. My mother had been frugal. She lived in a 2-bedroom house she never remodeled. Bought her groceries in cash. She'd pinch pennies between cushions just to give me $20 in an envelope at Christmas. She wasn't poor, not by the end, but this? It didn't make sense. How much? I asked. My voice came out hoarse. Eric clicked again. The number appeared on screen. I blinked. Blinked again. Said nothing. 6 digits. Then another. It looked fake. It looked like Monopoly money. But the screen didn't lie. That can't be right, I muttered. He didn't respond. Just turned the screen back. You'll need to schedule an appointment with a trust advisor, he said carefully. But everything's active. It's been sitting here, accruing interest, since 2015. I did the math in my head. 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years since she passed. Did she ever tell you? He asked. I shook my head. My mouth was dry. No, not once. Eric looked unsure of what to say, like he was standing at the edge of something personal and didn't know if it was his place to speak. I stared at the table. That number. That name. My mother's quiet, unseen gift. A safety net she never mentioned. A future I had no idea existed. I remembered once, just months before she died, she'd asked me if I had a plan. Not for work, not for marriage, just a plan. I'd laughed and said, "Not really. I guess I'll figure it out." She didn't push, just nodded. I never realized that was her way of preparing to step out of the picture without leaving me empty-handed. I left the bank in a haze. The sun was too bright. My head pounded. I walked past a pawn shop, a gas station, a woman arguing with someone through a cracked window. Life around me continued as usual, but something inside had shifted. Not like a snap, more like a slow rotation, like the world had been slightly tilted this whole time and I'd only just now realized it. Laura had taken everything she could reach, but this she had no clue about, because she never asked about my mother. Never really cared to look past what was hers to control. She obsessed over appearances, clothing brands, investments, club memberships. She weaponized access. She mistook visibility for power. And now I saw what she had missed. The quiet kind of wealth. Not just in money, but in foresight. In love that didn't parade itself. Laura had been so sure she'd buried me. She built a narrative for our friends, for the lawyers, for the world. That I had clung to her success, leached off her life, and when she'd had enough, she cut the cord. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the real cord had never run through her. The next morning, I went back to the bank. Sat with a woman named Candace, trust specialist. She wore a navy pantsuit, diamond studs in her ears, spoke like someone who measured words like medicine. She confirmed everything, verified signatures, showed me the original documents, dated, signed, notarized. My mother had sold land in Kentucky, land I didn't even know we had, 146 acres, deeded to her after my grandfather died. She kept it in the family for decades, never touched it, sold it quietly, placed the money into an irrevocable trust in my name, and never said a word. Why would someone do that and not tell their own son? I asked aloud, not really expecting an answer. Candace looked at me with something almost like respect. Some people believe the best gifts aren't meant to change how someone treats you. That hit me harder than I expected. Laura would have never done that. Her generosity always came with strings and a ledger. If she bought you a coat, she expected to see it worn. If she paid for your plane ticket, she expected gratitude on display. Every cent came with a receipt. But my mother, she left it hidden. Let me flounder. Let me stumble. Let me find it only when I needed it the most. I walked out of the bank with an entirely different kind of weight in my chest. Not hope. Not even relief. Something older. Something heavier. The realization that I had let myself become a shadow of the man I could have been, because I thought I had nothing. When really what I lacked was just visibility. Not value. I didn't go back to the motel. Not yet. I walked 5, maybe 6 miles. Through neighborhoods I didn't recognize. Past houses with cracked porches and peeling paint. Past wide yards and abandoned trucks and tire swings that creaked in the wind. Somewhere between a shuttered barbershop and an old Baptist church, I stopped. Sat on a bench. Lit a cigarette I'd quit 5 years ago. And I made a decision. No calls. No grand gestures. No confrontation. I wasn't going to tell Laura a damn thing. She'd already decided I was nothing. She'd made peace with my ruin. She would have relished a breakdown. She'd dine on it like a story for brunch. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I would disappear not in failure but in silence. She would hear nothing. And maybe, someday, she'd wonder why no one had seen me begging for scraps. I wouldn't beg. I'd rebuild. Quietly. The revenge wouldn't be a check or a lawsuit or a gloating voicemail. It would be absence. It would be thriving where she thought there'd be ruin. I would exist like the trust itself, silently compounding, slowly growing, untouched by her gaze. Back at the motel, I packed the duffel bag, folded each shirt with care, placed the old photo of my mother in the outer pocket, touched the debit card like it was sacred. It wasn't about the money. It was about the inheritance of dignity. 2 weeks passed, maybe 3. I didn't count the days, not after the bank. After a certain kind of revelation, time stops running forward and starts circling you like a vulture, waiting to see what kind of man you'll become once the delusion dies. I stayed quiet. I made no announcements. I bought a used car in cash. A dull gray Nissan Altima with a cracked taillight and a cigarette burn in the back seat. I didn't care. It ran. That was enough. My first purchase wasn't a house or stocks or revenge. It was a set of tools, socket wrenches, drills, a few chisels. I found a short-term lease on the edge of town. One of those forgotten rentals wedged between a shuttered strip mall and a vacant lot. 2 bedrooms. Mold in the bathroom. But it had a garage. And the garage had a concrete floor, which was all I needed. I got a prepaid phone. New number. Same silence. There was something about the physical act of rebuilding that gave shape to the emotional ruins I'd been crawling through. Fixing the drywall. Replacing rotted wood. Sanding down chipped corners. It didn't matter if the place would never be mine. The act itself was mine. My hands, my sweat, my rhythm. At night, I ate canned beans and rotisserie chicken. Drank cheap beer. Listened to the hum of the ceiling fan as I stared at the water-stained ceiling. It should have felt like rock bottom. But it didn't. That moment had already passed. Back in that motel room under Laura's shadow, thinking I had no name without hers. Now I wasn't beneath anything. I was just under construction. Then the text started. Blocked numbers. Unknown senders. But the tone was familiar. Polite. Clipped. With the faintest scent of panic buried beneath punctuation. Hey, heard you left town. Just checking in. Hope you're doing all right. Not sure if you still have this number. Laura mentioned you might be going through something. Let me know if you need anything. I know things got messy. We're all just trying to adjust. Let's get coffee soon? They were all from the same category of people. Laura's friends, mutual contacts, hangers-on who treated me like a coat rack for years. None of them had reached out when I was evicted from my own life. But now that I'd vanished, I had become interesting again. I didn't answer. Not one. Then came the call I knew would come eventually. Blocked number. 3 rings. I almost let it go. But something told me to pick up. Hello. Silence. Then her voice. Not Laura's. Sandra. Her sister. Michael, she said. Like she hadn't said my name in years. I waited. You okay? Never better. A beat. Then, you've been quiet. Funny. I thought that's what everyone wanted. She sighed. Look, I'm not here to argue. But Laura's been, I don't know, jumpy, worried. That made me laugh. Loud, bitter. Worried. She thought you might do something stupid. I did. I left. More silence. Then, look, she might have gone too far. Freezing everything. The way she kicked you out. She didn't kick me out, Sandra. She removed me like a stain. And you watched. I wasn't involved. No, but you didn't stop it. That ended the conversation. The next message came from Laura herself. I should have deleted it, but I didn't. I let it sit there on the screen, watching it like you watch a fire from across the street. Curious if it'll spread or die out. Just wanted to check in. I heard you accessed some kind of trust? From your mother? That's great. Glad you're finding your feet. There it was. She had found out. Someone at the bank. Some old contact. Springfield was smaller than she liked to admit. She couldn't stand not knowing. It wasn't the money, not really. She had more than enough. It was the control. She'd built a narrative around my failure. And now it was unraveling. I didn't respond. Not out of pettiness, out of clarity. The second I engaged, I became her story again. And I was done being a subplot in the Laura Hill universe. I began visiting my mother's grave weekly. She was buried just outside of town, in a quiet patch of earth surrounded by trees and silence. I'd never been religious, but there was something sacred about sitting on that bench, eating gas station sandwiches, and talking into the wind. "Thank you," I said once. Just that. Nothing else. Some nights I would drive the back roads with no destination, windows down, country music I didn't even like playing low on the radio. Just the hum of solitude and the slow understanding that I didn't need anyone to see me to be real. And then it happened. I saw Laura again. Not in person, not at first. It was an article. Some online puff piece about a charity gala in Kansas City. There she was, high heels, champagne smile, new man on her arm. The caption read, "Power couple Laura Hill and Grant Davison shine at Hearts for Youth fundraiser." He had the look she always liked. Teeth, tan, expensive watch. Real estate just like I'd guessed. His bio mentioned 5 properties, 2 lawsuits, and a motivational podcast. I should have felt rage. But all I felt was distance. Like watching a rerun of a show I used to love before realizing it was never that good. A week later, I ran into Martin. Old mutual acquaintance. He spotted me at a hardware store, picking up supplies. "Michael? Jesus, man, is that you?" I almost didn't recognize him. Hair gone gray, gut blooming beneath a polo shirt that had seen better days. He looked stunned. "We thought you left the state." I just smiled. "I did." He asked where I was living, what I was doing, if I was okay. I didn't give him a single answer. Let him report back to Laura. Let them guess. 2 nights later, the knock came. It was raining again, just like the day she threw me out. I opened the door. There she was. Laura. Hair perfect. Lipstick sharp. But her eyes, they looked tired. Not sleepless tired. Losing grip tired. Like someone who realized the house she built had cracks she couldn't seal. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked through like she owned the place. Old habit. Looked around at the tools, the plywood, the barely finished walls. Her nose wrinkled slightly, the way it used to when she saw something beneath her standards. But she didn't comment. She sat at the table, crossed her legs, waited for me to speak. I didn't. She finally broke the silence. "I heard about your mother, the trust. I didn't know she had that kind of—" "You never asked." She blinked. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "It's accurate." She looked down, smoothed her skirt. The silence stretched. "I wanted to say I'm glad you're okay." That made me laugh. Short, dry, no humor in it. "You wanted to say you're losing control," I corrected. She looked up sharply. "Excuse me? You built a narrative, Laura. You needed me broken, poor, dependent. You needed everyone to believe you were right, that I was nothing without you." She said nothing, but her silence agreed. I leaned forward. "Let me tell you what I realized, Laura. You were never afraid of me being nothing. You were afraid of me realizing I never needed you." Her mouth opened, then closed. I kept going. "My mother, the woman you barely spoke to, left me more than money. She left me freedom. She left me proof that love doesn't have to come with chains. And she did it without needing a damn thank you." Laura's eyes welled up. Whether from anger or regret, I'll never know. She stood. "I made mistakes," she whispered. "No," I said. "You made decisions." She didn't argue. At the door, she turned. Rain glistened behind her like some movie scene. "Will I see you again?" I thought about it, then answered honestly, "I don't think so." And then she was gone. Just like that. I locked the door, sat at the table, opened a beer, and I felt nothing. Not triumph, not sorrow. Just the strange, quiet satisfaction of a man who had finally stopped asking to be seen. 3 days passed after she left my doorstep, and not once did I wonder if she'd come back. Because I finally understood something simple, something I'd spent the better part of a decade trying not to believe. When someone tells you you're nothing and you believe it, they own you. And Laura Hill had owned me for far too long. Her silence was a currency. Her affection, when she gave it, was a performance. A short season. A reward for compliance. The moment I needed her, truly needed her, she didn't just retreat. She burned the bridge behind her. And then she told the neighbors I had drowned trying to cross it. She believed she'd ruin me permanently, that I'd fall into some pit of male mediocrity. Beard unshaven, socks unmatched, muttering about the one that got away between mouthfuls of microwaved spaghetti. That I'd become the ghost of a man who once stood beside her at charity galas and smiled too wide while holding her wine. But she was wrong. Not because I rebuilt, but because I stopped asking her to see me. There was a freedom in that. An odd, hollow freedom. Not the soaring kind. Not joy. No, freedom like standing in an empty house, stripped bare of furniture, and realizing the echo you hear is your own voice, for the first time in years. I stayed in that little rental on the edge of town for 6 months. Long enough to patch every wall, fix every pipe, install new wiring. Not because I needed to, because I wanted something to answer to. A structure, a skeleton, proof that my hands still built things. And in that time, the messages kept coming. Some from Laura. Some from the friends who once circled her like moths around a heat lamp. They came with polite concern, with baited language, with compliments disguised as traps. So good to see you doing better. I always knew you had it in you. Laura mentioned how impressed she is. Says you've really changed. She talks about you sometimes. Wonders if you two could talk things through now that things have cooled off. Talk? No. What we had wasn't cooled. It was buried. Cold doesn't undo fire damage. One message stood out. Came late. Almost midnight. A name I didn't recognize. My name's Leah. I was Mary's attorney when she drafted the trust. I wasn't supposed to contact you, but she left a letter. Said to deliver it if you ever accessed the account. Would you like it? I said yes. 2 days later, it arrived. Handwritten. Yellow paper. My mother's tight, precise script. Michael, if you're reading this, then you finally opened your eyes. I didn't want to tell you about the trust when I set it up. I was afraid it would change how you saw yourself. Or her. You were never meant to chase wealth, son. Only strength. And strength isn't how loud you speak or how hard you hit. It's how quiet you can be while holding up a world that doesn't thank you. I saw the way she looked at you. I saw how you started shrinking just to make her feel taller. And I knew one day you'd have to remember your shape. So I gave you something to catch you when the illusion broke. Don't waste it. Love, Mom. I read that letter 6 times in one sitting. Then I folded it back into its envelope, sealed it shut, and placed it in the center of my tool chest. Not for display, not for nostalgia, but because it belonged beside the only other thing in my life that had never betrayed me. My work. The months passed. I took on small jobs, fixing decks, installing drywall, refitting cabinets. I didn't need the money, but I needed the motion. I needed the weight in my back, the ache in my fingers. I needed to hear someone say thank you and know they meant it. One day, while replacing a bathroom floor, I got a call from a number I hadn't seen in over a year. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe finality, said I should. Michael. Her voice. Laura. I didn't speak. I didn't expect you to answer. Still, I said nothing. She hesitated. I wanted to say I was wrong. That got my attention. About what? I asked. She exhaled. Everything. I almost laughed, but it came out bitter. Too late, I said. Too easy. I know, she whispered. I just wanted you to hear it. I hung up, not out of anger, but because I didn't need her to finish. She had already said enough years ago when she turned the key behind me and called it liberation. There was a freedom in not needing the apology, not craving it, letting it pass through me like wind through an open window. A few weeks later, I visited the bank again, not to withdraw, not to invest. I transferred most of the money into a scholarship fund under my mother's name. For nursing students. First generation. Rural backgrounds only. I left just enough for me. Enough to live. Not enough to forget. Because forgetting would be worse than losing. I kept the Altima. I stayed in that rental longer than I had to. I said no to the friends who came crawling back, sniffing at the scent of resilience like dogs circling a butcher shop. I didn't need them, and I never saw Laura again. Not really. She still sent emails. Birthday messages. A forwarded article once about how divorced men struggle with loneliness. I marked her as spam because loneliness wasn't the worst thing I'd ever faced. No, the worst was living beside someone every day who made you feel alone anyway. Now I had space, quiet, tools, my mother's letter, and a name that no longer felt borrowed. Michael Collins. Not Michael Hill. Not Laura's husband. Just Michael. I never remarried. Never felt the need. People say healing is a journey, but they forget that sometimes healing isn't about going somewhere new. It's about sitting still long enough for the dust to settle so you can see where the cracks were. Mine were everywhere, but they weren't fatal. They were mine to mend. So I ask you now, you who've listened to this story, who've read these lines and followed this path down to the roots, was I wrong? To walk away without screaming? To build in silence? To let the woman who broke me walk back into a house I'd rebuilt and find the door already locked? Was that cruelty? Or was it justice? Tell me. If you were in my place, would you have handed her the key? Or would you have built a new house with thicker walls and finally lived inside it alone? Not as punishment, but as peace. Because that's what this is now. Not a victory, not a revenge, just peace. And for the first time in years, I can sleep